right, so you know what I'm saying. Look, I know you're gonna appreciate this one, Salamander, because we got the. I wanted to dab a little bit into that kayfabe word we was talking about when we discussing. Nah, I ain't gonna say debating. When we was discussing if wrestling was a sport or not. And by the way, I've seen the comments. You told me to check out the comments. I specifically went and checked out those comments, and I see what you're saying, nephew. But again, like I said, we're not gonna pretend that our audience here ain't a little biased.
Touche.
All right, so let's go ahead and check this K-Fab. Ooh, no, let's see, put it back. There we go. Fab. All right, y'all. So these people, they ain't got a whole lot of videos, man. But if y'all want to check out the rest of their videos, man, you see where they at, man. Go subscribe to their channel, check them out. Especially if you find this interesting for our wrestling fans out there. They did put together some interesting material here for us to check out. Go ahead, check it out. Give me a sound check after I press play. Give me a thumbs up, and then that way I can go ahead and mute my mic.
This is one of the biggest moments in recent wrestling history. It's the main event of WWE's Monday Night Raw, and John Cena is facing off against R-Truth in a much anticipated match. Cena is about to finish things off when another wrestler, CM Punk, rushes in and interferes, costing him the victory. Last-minute reversals like these are par for the course in pro wrestling, but the reason fans haven't forgotten this moment is what comes next. Punk takes the mic, sits down on the entrance ramp, and proceeds to deliver a monologue about all his grievances with pro wrestling.
Oops, I'm breaking the fourth wall.
And he doesn't just stop at his scripted feud with Cena. He goes after Hulk Hogan and The Rock.
The fact that Dwayne is in the main event of WrestleMania next year and I'm not makes me sick.
He calls out the fans.
You're the ones that buy those programs that my face isn't on the cover of.
And finally, he goes after CEO Vince McMahon.
Let me tell you a personal story about Vince McMahon, all right? Can we do this whole bully camp?
Or at least he tries, before his mic gets cut off and the screen goes dark. Okay, so why am I showing you all this? I want to try to persuade you that beneath all the silliness and spectacle, there's actually something really interesting going on here. And it comes down to a word.
Kayfabe? Kayfabe, the system of stratified lies that professional wrestling is undergirded by.
That's Eric Weinstein. He's a mathematician, an economist, a podcaster, and an all-around polymath. Back in 2011, he was asked to write an essay on the most important scientific concept for everyday people to understand, and he chose kayfabe.
I wrote this essay anticipating that professional wrestling was going to turn out to be incredibly important. And in fact, I thought it was going to determine the presidency.
Weinstein argued that the altered reality of kayfabe helped explain why some of our most trusted institutions were falling apart. And that was in 2011, before, well... In this series, I want to try to explain how we got here, and what wrestling has to teach us about it. It's a story about economic growth and stagnation, about violence and entertainment, and about how the United States became a nation addicted to fantasy. This is how politics became pro wrestling.
You suggest professional wrestling is fake?
I'm suggesting politics is fake. Politics today is pro wrestling.
So let's go back to the match, because to understand how politics became pro wrestling, you have to understand how pro wrestling became pro wrestling. Like all such contests today, this is what's known as a work. The fight is scripted.
Back so far.
Hold on real quick. We got to check something out real quick, though. Let me just say, for those who don't know, and there might be some to disagree, but Jesse Ventura was my nigga. It's after wrestling. You know what I'm saying? And maybe even a little after politics. But do y'all remember that show he used to have? Conspiracy, something about conspiracy. You know what I'm saying? He used to dab into and go places. He's the one that showed them all them back in the day when they had all them caskets and stuff. Like, man, they expected a lot of deaths. You know what I'm saying? Back in and exposed all that and stuff. That was all way before COVID. COVID might have been that event that they used all them for. But anyway, yeah, Jesse Ventura was my nigga though, man. If I conspiracy shot, it used to be my thing back in the day. All right. He said politics is fake.
That includes everything from the strenuous choreography to Punk's last-minute interference, despite the surprise on John Cena's face. But pro wrestling wasn't always fake. It evolved out of a sport called catch wrestling, or catch as catch can, which rose to prominence at the turn of the 20th century. Before that point, a variety of wrestling styles were practiced in local matches across the country. The ascendance of catch helped create a unified brand for the sport, and with it, a new business model. Promoters and competitors began touring the country in an attempt to make wrestling a mass audience attraction. But they had a problem. Traditional catch matches only ended in pins or submissions, which meant they could last for hours without much excitement. They were also incredibly dangerous. A star wrestler in the prime of his career could be suddenly incapacitated, or worse. This combination of general monotony and occasional extreme danger is at the heart of why kayfabe was born. Remember this, because we'll come back to it. To turn wrestling into a more dependable product, a new generation of promoters began making changes to the sport. They started gradually with things like softer mats and time limits, but eventually moved to full-on worked matches. They established closed leagues, or promotions, to protect wrestlers from honest competition. Influenced by the shady practices of carnivals, they began thinking of spectators as marks for the taking. That's where the term kayfabe comes from.
Kayfabe is carnival speak for the word fake.
It's a kind of code word, representing an agreement by everyone inside a promotion to maintain the deception of everyone outside. Breaking kayfabe, either by admitting the fakery or engaging in real competition, became known as shooting, another carnival term. That's what Punk was doing when he grabbed the mic. Shooting. Or was it? This is where things get...
Dollar Man. Did you hear,
Yes, sir.
Did you hear what that man just said? Would you agree with that? When
Yeah, what he's saying is facts so far.
when they engage in competition, that's considered going against the norm, against the system. That's shooting. Is that pretty much what he said? When engaging in competition, that's going against the show. All right. I just want to point that out because we was talking about sport, and I'm saying, how can you, if you take competition out of something, how can you still remain calling it a sport? Is what I'm saying. And according to this man, engaging in competition is considered shooting, and he's going to explain more to us what shooting is. But I just wanted to, point that out. All right.
strange.
Do you know what a worked shoot is?
Yes.
Okay. What's a worked shoot?
As you've probably guessed by now, Punk's shoot is scripted. It's a worked shoot. But it's not exactly fake either. Many of his grievances are true. To this day, wrestling fans talk about how accurate the monologue was. In fact, it isn't totally clear what's not true here. And that's what separates kayfabe from mere fiction.
It has to do with the layering of nonsense and reality. So the idea is that you have something which is ostensibly fake. Then you have a breaking of kayfabe ostensibly, which is the shoot on top of the expected work. But a worked shoot is tertiary in that the shoot is in self fake.
Right.
And so a worked shoot is a tertiary deception.
It's a fake fight that appears real.
It's a fake real fight that appears to break out of a fake thing that is pretending to, maybe it's quaternary.
If all of this is getting hard to keep track of, that's sort of the point. At the beginning, kayfabe was about deceiving the audience, but over the years, it's evolved into something much more complex. By layering fiction upon fiction, kayfabe blurs the distinction between the two, not just for the audience, but for the performers.
You start doping reality with fakeness, and the brain can't go much beyond 4 levels of lies.
Here's an example. By all accounts, Vince McMahon plans to hand over control of the WWE to his daughter, Stephanie, and son-in-law, Paul Levesque, the wrestler Triple H. It's one of the things Punk complains about.
It's going to get taken over by his idiotic daughter and his doofus son-in-law.
McMahon's marriage to Levesque is legit, but their romance began as a storyline. In fact, it isn't.
It's funny that almost 10 years later,
I was gonna
that
say,
exact shit happened.
that's what's happening. Okay, because I was going to ask you, because I just read a headline of an article. That might have been earlier today. I seen that.
Yeah, Vince McMahon supposed to so-called come
But
back.
he came back or something to oversee the sale of WWE or something along those lines.
I
That's
think
what's
because
going on, or?
even though he's retired, he still owns a majority. So even though he retired and he stepped down and he named his daughter as co-CEO, and Triple H is basically the head of everything. So he do like the booking and all that stuff. Since he still owns the majority of the company, he's still there. He still runs the company.
Yeah, but
Like, look,
I find it funny that this is what they was talking about here. And then I was like, I remember seeing an article like very recent, like within the last day or two,
I
that
heard
was
that they're
speaking
trying to
about
sell
him.
WWE.
Yeah,
I don't
him
think they're
coming
gonna
back
do it
to
though.
oversee the sale of the WWE or whatever. And I'm like,
I don't think so because you got to think
and of course
it's
with the
all about
WWE. Well, go ahead.
since
My
we
bad.
since we're speaking about kayfabe and everything.
Exactly.
You gotta think about this. Wrestling is WWE is all about numbers. So Vince McMahon, when he retired, that very next episode drew in hella numbers because everybody was tuned in. So they wanted to see what happened next. How WWE gonna be without Vince for the first time ever.
Mhm.
Now Vince been gone for a while. They talk about he's coming back, but on January 28th, there's a pay-per-view. It's the Royal Rumble. So I think he's just returning just to sell that pay-per-view out. I don't think it's something major. I don't think it's nothing like that.
Right.
It's just to help sell out this pay-per-view, I think. Help build it up.
Well, I don't know, man. Like I said, it goes to the point of the video what we watching, and it's like when you're dealing with something that is like surrounded by so much, uh, we'll use their word, fake, fakery and whatever. Now, I know where I come from, we call it fuckery. So it's a bunch of fuckery when you continuously just playing with people's emotions and faking them, and presenting shit that ain't real and all that. But anyway. So it's no telling what's going on in reality with it. That's why I didn't really find the article interesting enough to dig deep into what they're talking about. It's like Vince McMahon was, coming back to WWE and to oversee the sales of it, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, they selling WWE, and of course, right away in my head, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we talking about professional wrestling.
Yeah.
That should either been sold or whatever. It ain't even worth me spending time thinking about. You know what I'm saying? As far as like if it's really happened, if it's real or not. But yeah, that would be some shit if he's selling it. Like, because what
I don't
ain't
think
it like
so.
family owned right now? Like it's him, and then what you said he has a daughter.
Yeah, Stephanie McMahon, the lady right there on the screen.
Okay.
But she's co-CEO because the other one is this guy named Nick Khan. He's a businessman that just got to the WWE not that long ago, like a few years ago. But he his strategy is business, so he treating WWE like a business. Stephanie, she grew up in the business, so she gonna treat it more of the professional wrestling way, run it that way. So he just made them both co-CEOs because since he came aboard, WWE made the most money they ever made. They got they deal with Peacock. That's a multi-million-dollar deal. He got the deal with Fox for SmackDown to be on Fox. That's a multi-million-dollar deal. So they made a lot of money with Nick Khan there too. So he made him and his daughter co-CEOs.
Hmm.
And then her husband Triple H, he's the seer of like the booking, hiring, like all that stuff.
I guess we'll see what happens, but I mean, I like how this, and that's why I know you anxious to get back into it too. So we're gonna get back into this video, especially when we get to the second one. That I think was a little bit more interesting. But Yeah, because I like the correlation that's getting ready to be made here between uh American pro wrestling and American politics.
Mhm.
So I'm definitely gonna allow us to get back into this. Yo, Pops, you anywhere around? All right, I'm getting ready to hit play. Unless you got anything else to say real quick, nephew.
Nah.
Until their fictional marriage had ended in acrimonious divorce that their real relationship got underway. That real relationship then got woven back into the storyline, as we see in Punk's monologue. The wrestling world is full of this. Off-screen romances turned into on-screen plots, fictional rivalries turned into real-world feuds. This constant blending helps create the unique psychology of kayfabe, in which, as one scholar puts it, the audience believes and disbelieves what it sees at the same time. As we struggle to tease reality apart from fantasy, the emotional reality of the spectacle begins to take hold. Eventually, it's no longer clear where kayfabe stops and the real world begins.
I think that we may need a wrestler in the White House.
I'd seen these other candidacies in other countries in which people seem not to be able to distinguish an actor from the character that they played, and whatnot. And so I believed that the system of laws within professional wrestling told us what was possible.
By this point, it's commonplace to point out that Donald Trump was a pro wrestling president. And with good reason. He's literally in the WWE Hall of Fame. Later in the series, we'll talk more about how pro wrestling tactics were instrumental to Trump's rise. But the question we'll come to next is how our political system got to the point where Trump was the man for the moment. He didn't just show up and make politics kayfabe any more than Hulk Hogan could show up in tights at a UFC fight. Just as with wrestling, politics didn't start here. It got here gradually. And it turns out that how this became this explains a lot about how this became this. There's a more general process here by which institutions transition from failed reality to successful fakery. Weinstein calls this process K-fabrication.
So what I call K-fabrication is the transition of something that usually has twin attributes, is very dangerous and very boring. And like war is like this. Mostly war is extremely boring and then, obviously can be quite deadly. So in order to routinize these things, we create kayfabe.
Remember how I said that kayfabe was born out of general monotony and extreme danger? Well, after World War II, this is what happened to American politics. With the arrival of the atomic bomb, the world simultaneously became a much safer and a much more dangerous place. The great powers couldn't afford to risk all-out war ever again, so they established a new international order, along with things like the United Nations, to contain the possibility of conflict.
If we do not want to die together in war, we must learn to live together in peace.
On the home front, Americans settled into a newly stable and prosperous existence. An expanding middle class migrated to suburbs and into the fantasy worlds of advertising and television. Even amid the turmoil of the 1960s, broadcast news helped create a shared reality. Incomplete, perhaps, but unifying.
That's the way it is. Wednesday, July 31st, 1968.
And for a brief golden period, the fantasy held true. Fueled by innovations in science and technology, the economy kept growing, and progress seemed inevitable. But then something surprising happened. The growth stopped, and suddenly reality could no longer deliver the entertainment we'd become accustomed to. By this point, the entire economy and the institutions that support it were built on an expectation of growth that...
Man, and this is like the last, as you see on the screen, this is like the last couple minutes, last couple seconds of it, basically. But I really wanted Pops to get ready to get this hit this part so he can relate to the next video a little bit more. But I don't know where he done disappeared to.